Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun cash flow forecasting software. And joining me today is Rob Grazioli, the managing partner of Bread, a Brooklyn-based creative agency. Thanks for joining me, Rob.
Yeah, my pleasure. Stoked to be here.
Now, every once in a while, I do have owners of creative agencies on the show. And I got to say, I always love it because it brings a whole bunch of nostalgia to me, because I actually had a creative agency for over a decade before I started Dryrun. So and I know things have changed, but it's still, I always love chatting with
Not
agency
so
owners.
much. Not so much. It's an age-old industry. Time is money. It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, little bits of changes in tech probably, and that's about it. But I imagine clients probably still the same as always. And before we dive into Bread, I'd like to get all the way back to like where you got that first inkling that you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not really sure. I didn't have that early drive to be an entrepreneur per se. So my journey started my junior year of college, and my dad was a CTO, so I definitely knew of that world of like the enterprise world, and I think I
Mm.
always saw myself there,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason liked that about life and maybe work, and saw myself doing well there. But at some point, so I went to Syracuse University. I ran into this one dude, Ben, who eventually became my business partner. But at the time, he was just super smart. And I felt like I should latch on to him beyond friendship, but also get into what he was doing at the time. And that was building websites.
Mm.
And there was a competition that Syracuse was holding on behalf of MLB.com to build a
Okay.
site for them, essentially. And we won the competition, but the process of building this site was the first time in my life I felt basically addicted to something. Like I could not stop thinking about it. I could not stop working. I enjoyed learning in a way that was completely new to me. And the subsequent semester, there was an idea to startup class, which is basically the Syracuse University trying to fund entrepreneurship. And we
Mm.
joined that class, not having an idea, but being some of the only people that could actually build things. So our first idea was to just charge people to build their ideas. But that was a horrible idea because kids in college don't have any money. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's really where our services journey started, and where I became an entrepreneur kind of by accident. I didn't know who Steve Jobs was. I didn't know anything about Silicon Valley. I was just enjoying learning, saw that I had value in this space, and jumped head first. So sorry, long story, I guess, but
No,
it's kind of a weird entrance for me.
it actually is sort of familiar to a lot of the entrepreneurs I talk to, because very often they come from not that this like, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, now how am I going to do it? They usually come from some area of expertise, and then they say, oh, here's an opportunity, and it just,
Hmm.
like you said, it's like a little magnet that draws you into it, without, sometimes people come on the show and they're like, yeah, I knew since I was like 6 years old I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But a lot of
Yeah.
times they started to show little tidbits of entrepreneurship, but it's later when opportunity comes up that they just kind of go, oh, that's where I want to be. I've worked here for years and I'm not crazy about it. I want to try this on my own. So it's there's lots of different paths, but it feels so much like from my experience that it's almost like you're born into it. Your mindset is there whether you know it or not.
Yeah, you have this sort of weird capitalistic rhythm where when an opportunity presents itself, you're just kind of throwing yourself into it almost subconsciously, I think, and excited by that. Um,
Yeah.
I also, in a weird way, always felt deeply self-conscious about being a business owner for whatever reason. I think maybe because I was in an environment where there were a lot of people starting businesses, and I had a hard time taking a lot of them seriously, and therefore struggled to take myself seriously. So I wonder if that's also a shared experience, like learning to take you and your business seriously. I don't know if that's something a lot of people struggle with, but that's something I really battled through early on. And
Mhm.
I was a designer and an engineer by trade. So I often called myself that when people ask me what I'm doing. And still to this day, I call myself a
Yeah.
designer. I mean, I definitely feel like a designer, but really what I am is a business owner. And it just feels weird
Yeah.
for me to tell people that. I don't know why.
It's a weird transition because I felt the same thing. Like I got a couple degrees in design. That's where I came from. And, yeah, for years, I think that's what it was. I was a designer. Truthfully, by 2, 3 years in, I'm not doing almost any design.
Right.
Like the team is, and every once in a while I ask an opinion or we're in front of the whiteboard, but I'm actually not sitting down and actually doing any of the craft at that point. And yet I still considered myself a designer that somehow ended up running a business. And, I remember at one point, we were talking about sales, and for some reason I had thought in my mind, I'm like, well, I don't know anything about sales. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a salesman. And then you think back and go, except that I've sold millions of dollars worth of
Yeah.
stuff,
Like
right? Like,
100% a salesperson, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
somehow it just happened, and I think there's a little bit of, uh, with business owners and entrepreneurs all the time, like imposter syndrome is something that a
Sure.
lot of people, including myself at times, have struggled with, because from the outside, other businesses always look like they're shiny, clean, and everything's amazing and perfect. And that's virtually never the case. When you're
Yeah.
talking with the owners and you see what happens, it's like, yeah, no, they're fighting the same battles everybody else is, right?
Yeah. If they're being
But there's
honest.
also, yeah, exactly. If they're being honest, and oftentimes publicly, it's on. It's very polished, and then when you sit down over a beer with somebody, suddenly it's like, oh yeah, they got challenges too. But I also think, coming from the creative industry, there was this little bit of, at least when I was, the environment I was in and when I was going to school, there was a little bit of this, being a creative was this almost like this artistic pursuit, and
Mhm.
being an entrepreneur and making money off of it was almost like a little dirty. Like you don't want to
Mhm.
mention it, kind of like you're a designer and it's all about being creative. And, and then you fall into it and go, yeah, except now there's payroll and now there's
Yeah.
sales and now there's everything else. Right.
Yeah. 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 And for me too is, so as like a product designer, there's an engineering facet, and I was technical coming into design. And that also contributed to not feeling comfortable in my skin, and also seeing design a bit differently than I think a lot of other designers at the time who, so in 2010, we really were still just coming into like digital product design and development. And for me, it was about almost more so function than anything else. It just had to work. It had to work well. I was super interested in how things worked. That's why I continue to program to this day, because for me, that's the foundation of everything. I feel like designers will hate me for saying this, but usually if you're starting a digital product company, you need an engineer. You can build a product without a dedicated designer. Is design happening? Of course. Is it happening poorly? Probably. But you can't build a company that's technology focused without an engineer. And I don't know. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but that's probably controversial.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a rabbit hole. That's just, that's a fact of delivering, quality product, right? Like it's,
Sure.
if you're not willing to have an engineer or someone, yeah, like basically developers and engineers that are professionals, you probably want to stick with posters, and yeah, maybe ruffle some feathers there a little bit, but, um, it's true. Like to be able to, do anything, I think, of consequence, and that's really moving forward. Technology moves so fast, and you have to be responsible to your clients. You kind of have to stick with that on the leading edge. A lot of times, you have to have pros at that. And I was fortunate in my days. I had some really talented and smart, both designers and developers and project managers and everything else. And today, like my co-founders are CTO and the brilliant, and like we wouldn't be anywhere without him, right? Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
that is
And
absolutely a
I'm curious how
necessity.
you made that switch from services into more, I guess, a more productized business. Uh, that's something I think we also share in common.
Yeah, like I don't know if you were smarter than me at it. We stumbled in thinking we knew more than we did, and it's been a lot of learning. The original products we built, then this is going back way back in 2008 sort of thing, when the bottom started to fall out of the economy. Up until that day, we were like not even realizing, frankly, how easy it was to just go and get work and do
Mm-hmm.
stuff and have money flowing through. And we weren't getting rich, but we were felt really solid and growing and everything. And then 2008 hits, and by you're already hearing rumblings, and then pretty soon it's like, okay, 70% of our market at the time are government agencies, and we knew we kind of got lucky because they were hanging on a little bit longer because they had budget dedicated, although a lot of them canceled projects midstream. Um,
Mm.
but when they shut down for years. And so we had this little window where it's like, okay, we finished this stuff up. There's no more coming. But the corporate world is waking up faster and there's opportunities there. So we had to do this fundamental shift. And it was such a challenge, and we had to learn so much on the fly. Now, I got to point to this about the product, but one of the issues that we ran into is while we're doing this transition and while we're lagging on new jobs coming in, well, I've got my team sitting there, and we rightly or
Yeah.
wrongly did not want to lay anybody off. We felt like a family. We felt responsible for them. And so what we did is around the same time the first iPhone came out, and we started developing product for the iPhone. And what it did is it really created a bug in me where I loved product.
Mm-hmm.
We did not know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it well. We had a couple of pretty good runs, like a couple of apps, especially one that did really quite well. It kind of whet my appetite enough. Um, but fast forward a few years, I sold that business and came up with this idea for Dryrun, and I felt like I'd dipped my toe into product. I felt like I knew product. I should
Yeah.
say that I felt like I knew it. And what it turned out was I had barely dipped my toe in, and it was a completely different world. And It's been just baptism by fire. Like
Yeah.
it's just what it is, right? It's such a different thing.
Is there any other way to really learn how to bring a product to market though? There's no way a book can prepare you for
No,
the unexpected outcomes of that process, right?
yeah, like the more information you get, the better. And having advisors and people that have done this ahead of you, it's all helpful. But I shouldn't say it's all helpful because it's not. The fact is, when you look back later, you find out some of it was really essential and groundbreaking and moved you forward 5 steps faster than you would have gone. And then there's other things that we mistakenly followed that almost killed the company.
Yeah.
And you don't know till later which ones they are. We, like you said, like there is this that baptism by fire. But the one thing we are so adamant about today and just absolutely religious about is talking with our customers and our potential customers. And that is it. Every bit of advisor, advice, consultant, um, it's very not even secondary, it's tertiary. It's like it's there's some little tidbit there, but it's like, hey, focus exclusively, talk with your clients, talk, and readjust on the fly. And that's what's really helped us more than anything is sometimes you have to be able to take everything in, but you got to really tune a lot of it out, right? Except for the what's super important.
Yeah. And was the thing that almost killed your company an overinvestment in building something? Like, very curious what your big mistake was.
We just, I think a first part is we thought, and you know, like I could probably go back and go like, yeah, we nearly died 5 times. Like,
Yeah,
but
I know. There's
realistically,
always You're
we
like basically
we
always on
just
the
keep
brink
going.
for a while, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like but we just, we're relentless and we hustle and we just keep
Yeah.
going. So it's wasn't um in a way like that dire. But
Yeah.
what I do think that some of the problems we had is we took a little bit of early success and thought we had product market fit before we did. Then
Hmm.
we did a mistake where we thought we were smarter than, you know, it's like, well, if this works here, then it definitely is going to work over here, which, you know, it's like, that is, um, again, just a complete sort of mistake on identifying that product market fit.
Yep.
And that's usually um, where we had some of our struggles, and where we got on track, again, was, and it's so stupid because there are times where we dismissed what we know now is that customer base that loves us. And we dismissed it a little bit of, oh, well, that's probably an outlier.
Hmm.
We literally convinced ourselves at times, because it's kind of like, well, we have this, no, we got a little bit, I don't want to change because this seems to be working kind of over here. That doesn't compute. Even though it was like, that is way better.
Yeah.
Oh, it must be an outlier. And that was, so there was, I don't know. Did we not read it right? Were we not talking with enough people? Like, I think it was like confirmation bias. Like, you're talking with the same
Yep.
people over and over again and trying to convince yourself. And when we kind of started talking to the right people, and suddenly it's like it doesn't overnight. It's like the cloud lifts a little bit, and you're like, holy shit! I think this is where. Oh, listen to more. Oh, wow! Go. Let's go this direction. And this it now when you look at it, it seems kind of simple, and it was like a pivot for us. But in time frame, it's like a couple of years. Like, it takes so long to do that, and we're, you know, um, yeah. I don't know if that answered the
Yeah.
question. I
No,
guess,
it
you
totally
know.
does. And it's funny. I genuinely, coming into this, just got off a call with some founders, and I'm trying to, I think, reshape how they're thinking about some of their go to market. But I think what you're identifying are two super common mistakes that I kind of preach, which is breadth and bias. And so ultimately, I think as someone building something, you have this idea in your head about what needs to be in the world. And it's very difficult to convince you otherwise because you feel like
Yeah.
the expert, you feel like you're listening and you know what's right. And so, yeah, if a little thing lights up that's a little bit tangential to what you think is core, it's difficult to shift focus to that. And
Yeah.
then, which leads to like the second big mistake, which is breadth. And it's very common to find yourself in this echo chamber of a small group of people versus
Mhm.
continually trying different avenues, and learning different ways to approach a particular problem or talking to a slightly different type of customer that can expose you and illuminate some of your biases. So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's spot on. And I mean, I ask because like I've obviously made all the same mistakes, you know. Um, cool, cool.
It's almost everyone, as every entrepreneur, especially building product, has gone through that. And I think some of the sort of tragedy of it is a lot of times when businesses raise money early, they're pushed to, the investors don't say, okay, try a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff and make sure you're getting the right path.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep.
you told us this is what you're going to do, and it's like, grow faster, die. And too many of them die because they're not given the opportunity to figure who this customer is, or this true problem you're solving, you know, how that all dovetails together. And like, I look today and it's hilarious because I still remember telling my co-founder early days when we hadn't even released a product, we were just talking about it, and we were just building it. And I remember coming from, you know, my agency days and running a business, I remember saying to him, like, yeah, no, you know, CPAs will, their accountants, they'll laugh at this, but they don't know how important cash flow is. And so what did we do is we went out and talked with
Mhm.
40, 50 small business owners, and they all, oh, yeah, it was kind of a challenge to figure out. And you know who our customer is today? It's the CFO.
Mm.
Like the highest level of finance pro that I thought, like we bypassed
Yeah.
and went all the way to, and those are the ones that care about us. And we
Yeah.
were so far away from that. Yet it's so silly because we were literally building a finance product and didn't go talk with the chief finance officer. It's even got the name in their title. And, probably again, a bit of imposter syndrome or whatever. And,
Yeah. I
the,
mean,
the
do you think
fluke
there's
for us is,
fear? Do you think it's fear-based where you're almost scared to know the answer to some of the questions that they'll? Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied, but you get what I'm asking, right?
oh, I think that is part of it. I think it's a big part of it is like, it's kind of like I knew what I knew to the core because I'd run a business. Right.
Yeah.
But then it was like, yeah, like I'm scared to go. I'm like, I'm not even reaching out at that point to a CFO because I'm like, they're not going to want to talk with me. Who the hell am I? Well,
Yeah,
it turns out
exactly.
the way that I pictured cash flow and scenario modeling and forecast and all of that happens to be the same way that CFOs do, unbeknownst to me, because I never talked with them until later. Right. But there is, it is, again, it's that a little bit of that imposter syndrome. And it's like, it's so scary what you're doing that you kind of want to hang on to any little thing that feels like it's that life raft. Like, okay, this is working. Let's follow that.
Yes.
At times that's the exact right thing to do. And at times it's the exact wrong thing to do. And it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
figure
And
out
to
at
your
the
point,
time.
the influence venture has in that is significant because
Yeah.
you have this immediate group of people that have given you money to do this kind of specific thing.
Yeah.
And there's all this fear around going to them and admitting you may have been wrong and having to convince them, basically resell a vision or resell a product is super scary. Um,
Yeah.
and so we started a services business in 2010. In 2013, and we used all of our profits to sort of try to build our own products to
Mm-hmm.
generate some passive revenue for the business. The goal was to build this like conglomerate of products, but ultimately one of the ideas that came out of that, like the eighth thing we tried to launch, was this
Yeah.
company called Density. It counts people in space, and we deliver analytics to Fortune 500 companies around how their real estate works, and all the data is anonymous. And that was like a core tenant for the product. But so we required building hardware. We were software people building hardware with a software component. So we had no clue what we were doing. We built a product that basically didn't work, raised money on that, realized it wasn't going to work, and scrambled to define a different hardware solution and basically raise money on that. And then we learned it wasn't going to work again. And
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time it took us to make that decision was basically unacceptable. It should have been like a decision we made in a minute, but it took us weeks because it was so terrifying to, one, come to terms with the fact that the investment to date wasn't going to pan out. And then two, when do we tell people? Like, how confident do we have to be in the next solution before we start to even expose that we're wrong? How do we deal with customers that think they're getting product? And there's all this fear. And I think I was just
Yeah.
talking to somebody about one of my greatest learnings in starting a couple of companies is just the power of momentum and how it has like a good side and a bad side to it. And if you have all this momentum in a direction, it gets super hard to start to pivot at some point. So learning how to stay small and nimble, especially in the early days, and building good foundation, I think is always super critical to any kind of future success. And yeah, I've made that mistake many times over, I think. Yeah, sorry to like,
No,
maybe that
this
was a
is
random example, but yeah.
No, no, not at all. That's actually this. I kind of want to dive into that because it's because we like I said, like even in my agency days, we dabbled a little bit with product. We've seen agencies over and over again sort of dabble with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they get some traction, and but when they do, they tend to be like, we can't run two
Yeah.
things. Like it's like we got to jump in with both feet on one or the other, and it's it all logically makes perfect sense. But the reality of product is it oftentimes takes like 100% of your dedication and time to just
Yes.
even have a chance. Right. And it's uh, but I imagine the thing is going through those, you now have experience that is super valuable. Are you still like pursuing product? Are you still kind of going like, yeah, we've learned a lot. This is where how we can make this work within our agency.
No, so we're not building products ourselves. We are starting a venture arm though. So that that we think we are better suited for to sort of have, or we think is a healthier dynamic
Mhm.
where if you really want to take a product to market, to your point, it's not 100%, it's 150%, it's
Yeah.
200%.
Yeah.
So we'd much rather use our experience and expertise to help support founders that can put in
Mhm.
that 150%. And we think we can help avoid them, help them avoid the mistakes that we've made in the past, and also give them some more hands-on help because we are still so fresh. I can
Yeah.
help put together your sales deck or define your sales motion or your pitch deck. We can do these things very directly. So we think that's where the line between services and a fund really play nicely together because our pencils are
Mhm.
sharp. Whereas a lot of venture funds, especially at the stage that we're investing in, which is the seed stage, these are typically finance people, or they're people that are many years removed from being boots on the ground and often can't be as supportive during those early stages where, uh, yeah, I mean, you have to move fast and decisions are critical and mistakes can end your journey. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's our, I think, our means of using that experience rather than taking products to the market ourselves. But obviously, we do support that function and do have some playbooks that we help founders run. And even our enterprise experience directly helps us work with some slightly larger businesses to help maintain that nimble attitude in either net new product launches or something like that. Um, but yeah, we also still tinker. I mean, we're builders. A lot of the founders are builders at heart. Like I'm building a video game in my spare time, and obviously it's difficult to restrain. I took up sewing. I don't know if you can see the sewing machine in the background here, but
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
trying to
Yeah.
find ways to still use that muscle in some respect. Yeah.
It's I was going to go kind of down that venture path a little bit, but I'm actually kind of interested in this other side because you know, running a business and especially like a tech startup or like it is really difficult and it's really taxing. And I know personally that the mind never shuts off.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I kind of want to dive into is, like you said, he picked up sewing, and because one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is same thing as there's things that I've picked up that are like I was making skateboards in my garage, and I
Oh,
started making
awesome.
like watches. You know, I'd get parts and from all over the world and then put them together, and these little hobbies that I have, they're very tactile. They're not
Yeah.
screen based. They're very much, and it's one of those things that helps me actually like get away from this complete onslaught and fire hose of information and stuff, and try and dial it down. And I was just curious, like how do you feel uh, this, like how important do you feel this sort of balance and having this other outlet is to founders?
I think it's honestly critical. I usually the progress I'm making in my side projects is a has a direct correlation to my mental health at any point in time. And
Mm,
ultimately, I am basically always working. If my phone's on me, I'm
yep.
probably thinking about my work. And the tactile nature of things and the fact that they're detail oriented things is essentially a form of meditation And it's really the only time I get similar types of reward faculties or whatever, reward mechanisms engaged, is when I'm doing these kinds of things. And it also forces me not to think about work.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a pretty serious issue, honestly. Like I
Yeah.
don't mean to make light of how work can really take over your life and the impact it can have on your relationships and all that. But these things definitely do help transition, or for me anyway. I can go from work, super intense work, into doing something more tactile. And another example too is I went to a poetry event not long ago. It was actually a lecture, and I'm not a poet. I don't have a lot of historical familiarity with poetry. And so this lecture was super challenging for me and forced me to sit down, engage in something totally separate for an hour.
Mhm.
I could not think about work at all, or I would just be totally lost.
Yeah.
And as a result, I was able to just transition into normal life with a level of relaxation and mindfulness that really had been foreign to me for a number of weeks. I was kind of going through a particularly intense period, traveling a lot. And so just switching of gears helps me get into a place where my mind is open. I can have better conversations with people because I'm not just consumed. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think these kinds of things are very important, especially for builders too. Where for me, there's often pent up creative frustration, I guess. I mean, I'm writing proposals, I'm writing investment memos, I'm
Mhm.
interrogating founders, I'm doing things that are communication oriented when ultimately my true happy place is like making something. And so I think that too just kind of helps balance my days and stay sane. So yeah, yeah,
I think
good
that's a
question.
really like I think probably a lot of designers are made the same way, like built the
Yeah,
same way. We like to build things, we like to make things, and I do very little of that these days in business.
yeah,
It's just not, it's the it's not a huge part of my role, right? And but I like I've of course we've all seen entrepreneurs that don't have an outlet, like they
yeah,
just don't, and they don't, and you can see that like almost the damage that that they sustain from having no outlet, no relief valve, no, because like I've told people before, like being an entrepreneur, it's not a sprint, and people say it's a marathon. I'm like, it's not a marathon. Like you're hiking around the world. Like I wish it was a marathon.
yeah.
Try
There's no
like
clear finish line.
years.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, and it just goes. It's endless, and it's you have to have a pace. You can't just sprint and run out of gas. Like when I hear of entrepreneurs that go like, I do 80 hours a week, I'm like, quit doing that,
yeah,
because you're going to flame out. You're not going to be able to keep that momentum up. Like you have to have some balance, because you're in it for years to be successful. Like there are the odd ones that are flashes in the, like, big flash of whatever. Those are, that's why they call them unicorns, because they're so, and even the so-called unicorn companies generally take years and years, right?
yeah.
But for
So
everybody
density is
else,
technically a unicorn business. It was eight
yeah,
years for us. Um, that wasn't the expectation going in. you know,
yeah,
that was a longer, and it's not even that long, but it still felt long. The other thing too, sorry to interrupt, but just I'm gonna forget, um, is perspective. And I think a lot of founders I interact with, I can almost tell how overclocked they are on their work because they generally lack perspective that there's life outside of it. And that impacts how
mhm,
you interact with your employees, it impacts how you interact with your customers, and ultimately everything typically comes down to relationships. Like if you want to do
yeah,
big business or you want to build a great company, it comes down to relationships. And there's no perfect way to be. But in general, I think people who are well balanced can build deeper relationships with people because they're more versatile in who they can
mhm,
interact with and connect with. And that's the biggest thing is I'm talking to a founder and all they can talk about is their business. I'm just losing interest. You're losing me.
yeah,
What you're doing is cool, but like you're just losing me. So
yeah.
anyway, wanted to get that out there. That felt felt good to get out.
Well, I could we could sit here and do an entire episode on relationships just
Yeah.
because, and just from a business perspective, like that one sliver, because it's, that is just still today, no matter what people say, business is built on relationships. And if you're doing like, larger deals, relationship with the customer is really important. But even if you're doing small and maybe it isn't, customers come in, it's online, it's small, but like you said, it's that you have relationships with the staff and suppliers and colleagues, co-founders, everybody else. But especially when you're doing sales, larger sales, and those relationships really count as well. I think for at times, like what non-business people think, or maybe ones that haven't felt like they've cracked that, that through that surface, relationships aren't, I know that person, talked with them once. Relationships have to be nurtured. And it's kind of a continuous over years of just touch points, coffee, calls, and lunches. And just, that is so important because, meeting someone's fine, but to have that, real momentum forward or motion, it's, you're investing a lot of time. And for it to be really effective, it works best when you're investing time because you just enjoy the person and the business outcomes come out of that, rather than you're going in with this goal in mind right out of the gate, right?
Yeah, you're going to have blinders on to who you're spending time with, and that's not always going to be the most productive thing for your life or for your business. You just never know what can come out of a good relationship, or how that relationship can pay dividends over the years, versus being so goal oriented and outcome oriented. I think it can be destructive. Obviously, there are examples of people who are like that and do extremely well in life and work. So I don't want to be so firm on that, but I think the average would agree with what we're saying, is try to balance your life and invest in relationships, even if they're not going to result in closing a deal.
Yeah. And, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs or maybe most entrepreneurs at heart, dollars are secondary, tertiary. Like I think it's really hard to be a successful entrepreneur, especially if you're innovating, when it's about the dollars. So it's about the creation, I think, and the problem solving. And if you follow that lead, I think the rest starts to fall into place.
Definitely. I think usually there's an irrational conviction around what a founder is doing that leads to some amount of success. Like, you can't be coin operated, because there just isn't a guarantee at the outset. And I think it's a process for some people, kind of shedding this idea and taking pride in something else, which is bringing something into the world, seeing someone's face while they're using it. Like, to me, are what excites me more than any dollar amount. It's just an unspeakable thing and such a vulnerable moment when you're giving something you made to somebody. Like, if you've ever cooked for anybody, you kind of get this. The anxiety preceding a meal you're cooking for somebody is so high, but the reward is priceless if you get the positive feedback that you were hoping for. It's immeasurable. And building products a lot like that. It's like cooking a meal. And that's ultimately, I think, what people get addicted to. And these good founders, again, not a hard, fast rule. There are plenty of coin operated people that perfectly happy and do well, but it doesn't always go that way. So you need something else driving you, for sure.
Yeah. It's just like, even you were saying, like, it was 8 years with Density. Like, we always hear about the 10-year overnight success. And that is maybe like an average for those ones. And, you hear of companies exiting after 20 years, and they're like, that's it. It's, I remember when I first started my kind of the agency, I started down that path, and I remember hearing it's like, well, it takes 5 years to build a business. I'm like, no, it took us like a month. We were already going, and then, 5 years down the road, also you're like, oh,
I get it.
yeah, no, no, I get it. There's a lot we've done in 5 years, and yeah, now it's a
Now it
business.
feels
Now
like
we
a
get
business.
all the stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was super beneficial. This sort of, I mean, we'll call it third time around, where we actually built something with value beyond our efforts. But knowing that year one, even if there was revenue, what have you, that the business would materialize later was something that was super helpful. Just having the patience and being willing to tear down and rebuild, and not assuming we did it early, I think was very, very valuable insight to have, having done it a couple of times now. And even now,
Mhm.
we're 2.5 years into bread. Like for me, there's still brand building, there's still process building, there's still some formation that needs to happen. And of course that's into perpetuity. But
Mhm.
before it starts to feel like a machine that you're managing, I think it just takes time and learning. Yeah. So I have a question for you. Um, how many business partners do you have?
Just one. I have a
One.
co-founder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How
Yeah.
long have you been working with them now?
Well, we started building, like we released in 2016. So we were building the app 2015. I probably met him in 2014, I'm guessing. I'd have to
Okay.
think back to that.
So there's a
Um,
pre-existing relationship that kind of went
no,
into. Okay.
no, I am beyond lucky, to be honest, because I
Okay.
know even in my agency days, like partnerships can be challenging, right? And uh, like having worked together this long and to work together so well is a real gift. And in fact, I think we work together better now than we did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Um, and that's not lost on me, because it's so hard to get something like this off the ground. And um, the people around you is like, that is the ideas are basically worthless. Like they are just a prereq.
Mm-hmm.
Execution and team is everything. And and that's, man, it's hard, and we've had our share of oopsies along the way, but I'm very fortunate that Tarek and I work so well together to this day, and work together, I think, better than ever. So
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think every founder needs to hear over and over again how just important it is to have that kind of companionship, and how hard it is and rare it is. And so we've had 5 founders and business partners, which is pretty bizarre and something we've always had to really fight against, because there's perception that even 2 co-founders are difficult to maintain. But yeah, similarly, I think have just been extremely lucky in that there's a friendship that underlies everything and a trust there, but this really great ability to separate friendship and work, and on the work side constantly be like a healthy competitiveness, a supportive competitiveness, and this ability to just make each other better every day.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know it's difficult to say like find yourself a great co-founder, but it can genuinely change your outcome
Yeah.
if you have one. So
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's because, like, I've been around long enough, pretty gray here, to see, a lot of businesses sort of the businesses implode, or um, they barely survive, but and it is really hard. It is really a challenge, and there is, I think, a bit of a measure of luck in there as well, to be honest.
yeah,
Like and but it is so essential. And like, even for us, like when you look at where we started, and then we kind of raised some money, and it kind of took us down a path that maybe it wasn't like it worked, but not. We realized that's not where we have to be. And then then we did a real pivot, and
mm-hmm.
that was hard. Like it's hard, but we were, investors are kind of like, I don't really get it. Like almost like, yeah, no, you told us this, we're out, like, not, they're out, but it's like, we don't feel like
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden crickets. And
Unconvinced.
then the sales, it's like, well, our market, we literally abandoned one market to go to the one that's kind of crickets. And then it's like, we got to rebuild this thing. And the entire time, um, it's just this belief that we both have that this is absolutely the way we have to go. And, um, and just like, we know it's tough, but just keep going and keep going and
Yeah.
keep at it. And now it feels pretty gratifying because it's like we went through these like dark times of, oh my God, this pivots. And now it's like, geez, we're talking with people every single day. And
Yeah.
they love us. This is where we have to be. And it's like, okay, now that next step is how do we get that engine really going?
Mhm.
And like that sort of, that's the type of thing that could break people and partners. And fortunately it's just made our belief stronger. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is lucky, and also I'm happy for you that you can that you guys were right.
So far we it feels like it's playing out. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but so I know you've been through a lot of things here, and now you're like so Bread, you said, is about 2.5 years old. um
Mhm.
I want to dive into that a little bit, like, because now you've got all of these experiences and all these, and it's like it feels like this is a bit of a culmination of all of that, right?
Yeah, I would say 100% a culmination of all that. Um, Being a founder forces you to wear a ton of different hats. It's a unique experience just to be in that position. It's also a unique experience to have gone through not just seed funding, but Series A, Series B, and Series C, and beyond. And I think it's something that sets us apart from a lot of other people, especially doing services. It's kind of weird. Like the first question we got is why you guys are like rel- comparatively successful founders and clearly can build things well. Like, why are you starting a services business? And for us, it just came down to one, we had immediately after leaving, I had started helping founders directly. And I just realized how much I loved being in that early stage and how much I learned for like the hard way
Mhm.
that could help these founders and get them to that Series A, get them their first million in ARR, and doing basically having the skill set to help on the sales side, help on the development side, help on the hiring side, help on the product side. Just felt like we had a superpower that we would really enjoy deploying, basically. And so it's definitely a culmination of all of these things, trying to uh, offload our learnings, but also do so in a way that's approachable for early stage companies that aren't swimming in excess profits. Usually they're not profitable. Usually they're pre-revenue. So they're either taking personal funds that they're trying to turn into a $1 million business, or maybe they've closed a friends and family or a seed round and they're trying to get to their next benchmark. So yeah, definitely a culmination of all of that. And I think also just a celebration of partnership, honestly. The main thing that happened, we all left Density at different times and slowly just realized we want to be working together. And this is a
Mhm.
way to basically bootstrap working together. Whatever happens in 10 years, we know we're not going to regret any of this because we've had the opportunity to uh, spend every day trying to build something with each other. So, yeah, a culmination, but also kind of a celebration, and trying to keep those good vibes going, and also impart some of that to founders who are in it. I
Yeah.
mean, we're along the ride, along for the ride. We're trying to start something too, but there's definitely a difference between being venture backed and being a essentially cash flow oriented business. The
Yeah.
pressure is different. Um, it's hard on both sides, but it's different. So anyway, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm rambling a bit, but um,
No,
yeah,
I think that's really interesting, but also think it's super valuable because having, working our way through what we're working with Dryrun and like I said, it's like advice, especially early on. And sometimes when you go down a path with investment and it's like, this is our thesis and you can't deviate. And there seems to be no shortage of advice out there that I don't even say it's book learned, it's blog learned. Like, seems to be a lot of experts out there that have read blogs and went to a conference or two, right? And so when I'm talking with founders, so often, first of all, I love talking with other founders. It's just, it's such a like a relief to talk with other people that are like in this community all the time, and share notes and exchange notes, but also true movement forward oftentimes comes from little things that you learn from other people that are operators that have done it or are doing it and have been through it. And the interesting part is, it's so often I've talked with other founders that have been really successful, and I wouldn't even say they give advice. It's like their little observations and things are so insightful, but they're almost like they never sound as confident as the one that read a blog, right? Yeah. And I look back sometimes and I'm like, all these like, really like positive, this is how you have to do it. And it's like, okay, well, they've never done it. And then I talk with a founder that's built something magical and just a little comment, and you're like, oh my God, that just makes so much sense. And it's just almost offhand, right? And it's having been through it, you kind of know, boy, it's hard. And there's 1,000 different directions you could go and everything. But the value of talking with other founders that have been through it is just epically powerful. And so what you guys are doing, I think, is so, I give you guys a lot of credit, because it's going to give startups and founders a much better chance of success, because it's legit experience behind it.
Yeah. I think it's important. Like, whenever I'm even being a bit forceful with a suggestion, I always make it really clear that this is a debate. Like, I'm not giving you an answer. I'm taking in information and I'm trying to come up with something new, but I have no freaking clue if it's exactly what you need. It's just another perspective, and one that is maybe based in something that's more, or based in knowledge more related to your precise business versus something generic online, and also based on sort of really hands-on experience where, I don't know, I can't say this enough. Half of the things that went well were dumb luck. And half of the things that went well were intentional, but even those didn't pan out exactly the way we thought they would. It usually just came down to effort and persistence. Like, that's genuinely the name of the game. I think a lot of what you're talking about on the product side is often a result of persistence, like willingness to be a bit annoying and not giving up. And I think that's mostly what we try to impart, is when it gets hard, when it gets dark, you have to have conviction in what you believe. And if you don't, that's also something, it's also where I usually start with founders, is I test their conviction on the problem. And if they don't have that, they need to get it. They need to find a way to get it, or do something they actually care about. So anyway, it's
amazing how just like, and I've heard this from so many founders that have been really successful, and just how much of it is just, like you said, it's just staying in the fight, staying around, just sticking with it until you get it right. Like talking with your customers till you get it right. And sometimes
it sounds so simple and silly, but it's just the reality. There's obviously good fundamentals, things like being organized, like basics of just running a good business that help. But at the end of the day, it's about hanging in there and listening to people, obviously listening and hanging in. Yeah.
So Rob, this has been an amazing conversation. We go on for 2 hours here, I think.
Yeah, I know. I definitely
it's keep going, but, this has been so much fun. But so I would like to ask, like, who should be reaching out to you, and how should they get hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, anybody. I love meeting people of all fields. I mean, obviously in a professional capacity. If you're a designer and want to chat, If you're a founder and want to chat, I genuinely just love hearing stories and meeting new people. So really anybody, specifically if you're a founder looking for funding, would be happy to have a more serious call about that. You can go to our site, breadvc.com, and get in touch. And if you're a founder looking to really accelerate your go-to-market, or just someone looking for advice on how to start their first business, you can go to madebybread.com and reach out to us there. But I also have a personal site, robertgrazioli.com. Happy to take personal requests. Doesn't have to be exclusively about business or financially motivated.
Yeah. No, thanks, Rob. This was a terrific conversation. And I would love to just keep going for another hour, but I'll have to let you get back to work. But this was really terrific. And thanks everyone for joining us today. This is just, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And especially if you're a CFO or a fractional CFO, you are part of a finance team and you're buried in spreadsheets with your cash flow and modeling scenarios, and it's just complicated and complex, come and talk with us. We'll save you hours every week, and we're going to give you something you can present to the management team that is crystal clear. And you can find us at dryrun.com.